And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us, where you will find links to, well, everything you need to know in your life. Our YouTube page, our Facebook page, that's right, we're already on Facebook, our Twitter account. We put out something called the Civil Liberties Log, which allows you to read some of the missives, the postings, the thoughts, the musings of organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, Common Cause. We're heavy on the ACLU at the Coalition Radio. Big believers in their mission. Locally, we are blessed here in Rhode Island to have one of the most activist shows, activist ACLUs going live. We're just setting up for the evening. If you've got a thought on our last guest, presidential candidate Ken Armstrong, maybe it was generational. I really enjoyed talking to everyone, but he and I just we started finishing our sentences by the end. And yes, I am kind of one of those talky hosts that sometimes talks. Ken was far more interesting than I was this evening, but he was spot on, and he was also very thoughtful and had a lot of interesting issues. But again, we want to invite on all libertarian presidential candidates. It's important, particularly in a year when we don't have, or won't have, or might not have, we're not sure, what's going on with the convention. Continued hats off, by the way, to the COC, the Convention Oversight Committee, for their tremendous efforts under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. I want you to think of them for a moment. I want you to think of them all the time, but let's just ponder their situation. Here we are, a month and a week before a major undertaking. We're talking about a meeting that will be attended, or would have been, depending on the circumstances, by a couple of thousand people from around the country. There is a committee that is dedicated right now to ascertaining the delegate status of each of the 1,000, 11, 1,200 plus folks who are delegates. Yeoman's work. They have to check their statuses within their various organizations. They're at work. The Convention Oversight Committee, of course, they're facing the same challenges in their personal life that all Americans are, that I am. I'm not going to quote their employment status, but, in one case I know where someone works in healthcare, she's working double and triple time. She works with folks who are often in the last stages of their corporal lives. She is a tireless advocate for them, and she is also a tireless advocate for liberty, as well as being on a variety of activist committees as well. And yet she is in a situation of having to worry about the welfare of her patients, the welfare of her family, and this vast undertaking that she has been let's just say, an incalculable part of for a few years now. I think you all know who I'm talking about, Aaron Adams. A force of nature to be reckoned with. One of those, if there are in any organization people who are quote unquote indispensable, and that is not something that she would ever claim to be. I don't know how we continue to operate as an organization without her. And they're all over the place. You've met a lot of them on the show. You'll meet some more as we go on. Because, again, one of the purposes here is to elevate the people within the movement, to celebrate people within the movement, to give voice to people in the movement, and to recognize efforts, heroic efforts, to recognize people. Because folks are folks. You can't expect them to toil in the background forever. And there are those folks that we will never know the first names of, who have done just that, in some case for 30 to 40 years of their life. The founders, the people who were there at the beginning. So what you've got here is a vast commitment to justice, to civil rights, to individual rights, on a level heretofore thought impossible. And at times like this, when those folks are faced by incalculable challenges in their own personal life, somehow they still seem to give, and some of them even give more. This single-handed pursuit of liberty is inspirational. Absolutely inspirational. So recognize those people within your organization. Recognize those people who, and while not all of us are just as capable, as committed, or sometimes it's just various stages of people's individual lives are able to be that committed, but yet so desperately want to find inspiration from them. Do what you can. Candidate Armstrong actually gave witness to that. Do what you can within the confines of your life. And in that point in time, it might be a generational thing. Your kids might be going to college. Any one of a number of issues that might raise. It might be income related, health related. When folks are in that position, do what you can to step it up. This is a generational battle. This is not something that's going to be fixed, accomplished, taken care of. This ain't no 1 hour legal show where you get closure in the last 5 minutes right before they cut the credits. Nope. This battle will continue long after I've left this mortal coil. And so we ask you to do the same thing. Fight where you can. Rise up where you can. Join us where you can. Area code 401-205-3738. So this is, of course, the challenge for our show. We just had great response to a worthy candidate. Folks, hanging on every word he had to say. And now I am here alone. So I'm hoping folks will call in. We're working on the transition, if you will, from guest to talk show host. If you've got comments about candidate Armstrong or any of the candidates have been on, or candidates that you would like to see on, let us know at 401-205-3738. We are still on the air. There's a new caucus in town because there's a seemingly endless series of caucuses. I'm hoping someone will come up with a website called the Caucus Caucus and list all the caucuses. I think this is a noble effort. I believe it was started by Kim Rupp, but I could be wrong. So please correct me. I'm talking about the Libertarian Party Smoked Salmon Caucus. If you are part of that, please let me know. 401-205-3738. If you could take a moment and let us know what your thoughts were about candidate Armstrong's conference. Were there questions I missed? We're hoping to have Judge Gray on in the next day or so. He got caught up in a legal proceeding. He is still very much an engaged attorney, an engaged barrister, an engaged judge, if you will. And, so we got caught up in that last night. So I'm hoping he can make it on in the next day or so. Well, our last couple of candidates, high standards to reach. High standards to reach. (401-205-3738). If you've got suggestions for this segment of the show, now this again has been the challenge. We just started this segment about 2 weeks or so ago. And getting libertarians to call in. Ken Moman, of course, discussed this with me online last night. Ken's a big fan of talk radio, loves to call in, and he's a great contributor to the show. He'd like to see people break out of their shell. By the way, if you're local to the Providence, Rhode Island area and you want to discuss the state of Rhode Island's reaction to COVID, feel free. Feel free. We'll be up as long as the callers take us. Wow. We went almost an hour and a half with candidate Armstrong. (401-205-3738). If you can't watch us on the Facebook, hopefully you'll get the word. And join us on coalitionradionetwork.com. Like most indie social medias, particularly one that's so aggressively political, we are in desperate fear of getting zucked. The way around that, of course, is to get folks to listen in. So again, if you're talking and want to talk about COVID in the state of Rhode Island, caught some grief today because I gave a radio host a hard time when talking about our governor here in Rhode Island, who I think has done a tremendous job if you're looking at her leadership from a public relations perspective. Not so good if, in fact, you're looking at the human results. We've had a guest on a couple of times lately, a Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz, whose expertise is in public health care as well as supply chain economics. He has spoken provocatively. We just got a message from the Jim Gray campaign just a few minutes ago. He will be on tomorrow evening. We will repost that tomorrow after we look up the exact time. We thank him for his willingness to join us. We're grateful for that. And hopefully we'll have the same kind of conversation with him. I've had him on the show a number of times, particularly during his tenure being involved in an organization called LEAP. At one point, I believe the LEAP acronym stood for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, although they morphed that a few times. A tremendously effective organization that, frankly, gave great testimony, and preached from a compelling perspective against the war on drugs. Most of the members of LEAP were actively working or recently retired law enforcement professionals. Judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, police. Again, speaking to the war on drugs from a perspective, just in a sense, like our prior guest had on, candidate Armstrong. He, having worked at the highest level of the United States Coast Guard, obviously a singular mission for them was drug interdiction, which brought them head first, if you will, into the war on drugs. Or as we libertarians like to say, the failed war on drugs. I had the opportunity to point out to law enforcement here in Rhode Island at some civil testimony about a year or so ago that their effort to interdict drugs had been a generational failure, which had resulted in tension and the destruction of the relationship between law enforcement and local communities across Rhode Island. That despite all their efforts, drugs were available on a casual basis to literally everyone of every generation, of every background. That, in fact, their insistence on prohibiting drugs had led to nothing less than a grotesque level of danger on the streets of cities across America. They had, in fact, exacerbated the impact of drug abuse as opposed to containing it. And they were what represented everything wrong with public life in America today. I believe in full legalization. Let's go down the issues I believe in, and you can argue vociferously against them. I believe in full legalization of all drugs. I believe in decriminalization of commercial sex work. I believe in open borders. I want to end the FDA. I want to end the FAA. I want to end the FCC. I want to end public education. End it. If there was a way I could figure out how to port all of our nation's students this summer over to and away from to private alternatives and away from public schools, I would do it. The common sense in me says you can't do it, so you got to find a way to port it. The devil in me says that the devil is in fact in incrementalism. And that represents the very worst of American public policy. I always draw the analogy of medical cannabis. For those states that were early adopters of medical cannabis, many of the biggest opponents locally to the full legalization of cannabis for entertainment uses, as they say, were in fact the people who had attained a monopoly on the legal distribution of cannabis through the medical cannabis program. Incrementalism is the devil. I'm always open to a conversation on how to port children away from our public school system. Drugs, you can, with the strike of a pen, you can make drugs legal. You can certainly do it with cannabis. The strike of a pen. It's really that simple. With the strike of a pen, you could end most of these federal agencies. And here's the important reason why you need to end them. Not wind them down, but end them. I am going to invite Arvin Vore on the show. I hope he'll get an opportunity to join us. He did a few years ago when we were in our earlier implementation on the Go Local Live network for folks from Rhode Island area. Federal agencies are like a tumor. They all start off as benign. Some of them stay benign. Many of them, though, become cancerous, and they grow at the expense of the host organism. Mission creep is part of the DNA of your government. Absolute DNA. And how do we exorcise that? By the full removal of the tumor itself. That's how we do it. If you've got suggestions, call in. Let us know what you think. Am I a starry-eyed optimist? A dreamer? You let me know. I'm going to engage in some marketing right now. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty, Twitter @Coalition_. What do you want to talk about? Is there a local issue? If you live in Michigan, for example, and by the way, we reach through the miracle of IP addresses and the internet, we reach the entire country. And there are libertarians. There's quite the libertarian affiliate in Michigan. Folks are taking to the streets. Because their governor has taken such a strict interpretation of what needs to be done to fight this dreaded disease. You name it. Again, I want to thank all the folks who took time to tune in tonight to Ken. Great experience. First time Ken and I have actually spoken. The very first time we've spoken. We've chatted once or twice on Facebook and just kind of joshing back and forth. If folks happen to skip across this from now on, imagine talk radio live at 10:30 at night. There are more than a few folks. More than a few. Who might be suffering from a little insomnia. Late night talk radio relies on the insomniacs, believe me. I've listened to late night talk radio in L.A., New York. Boston used to have a wonderful show. A lot of those shows are gone now. And I'm not sure why. I can't believe it's the cost of production. As conversation in and of itself a lost art? I can babble on endlessly. As we're in the startup phase to this, we've had some nights where a bunch of folks have called in. Other nights where you can literally hear the crickets on the internet. You can hear the routers humming. The switches switching. Other nights, last night in particular, the lines were heated up. We had a few people called in. Because of the fact that we're new, you could call in and hold forth for a while. Really get into an involved argument. There was somebody on the internet who took umbrage today at the fact that I called out our governor. Umbrage, I say. Wanted to know what I had to say. I'm a talker, not a writer. I'm not going to sit down there for a half hour and write out a response to one person. Didn't really felt it was important enough for a blog piece or a written piece. Frankly, I don't have the time. I'm as busy as hell. Hopefully, folks who have had to hunker down have found things to work on, languages to learn, books to read, films, a chance to connect through the miracle of the IP address, the folks that they may have lost touch with, or sadly enough, folks that they may have, for all the wrong reasons, lost touch with. Maybe this is one of those life events where you reach out to people that you feel badly, that you've left on bad terms. Love to hear that story if, in fact, you'd like to make it. If you'd like to make it, we're here to listen. Got to get one of those voice changers. That's what we need. Yeah, that's the ticket. That's the ticket. So join us at coalitionradionetwork.com. The reason why we tend to promote that website address, it's a very simple website, not a lot of drama to it. Kind of a drop-down list of schedules for people who are coming on the air. That's the purpose it serves. It really serves as really just a website to host kind of think of it as metaphysically as a TV screen to watch our live programming as it evolves, as it grows, and it will grow. We're talking to a bunch of people who are interested in adding their voice to this little network to really create a network, to give it the feel of not just one guy's show or one guy's series of daily call-in radio events, but to offer it in our sort of evolving mission statement, the greater culture. If there's something you'd like to contribute, let us know. You can reach me at p4@coalitionradio.us. My name's Pat, if you haven't guessed it. But take a shot and join us. If you dare. So a gentleman on one of the pages I monitor, his name is Bob Wire. We have yet to find anybody in Rhode Island named Bob Wire, but if that's actually your real name, feel free to call us. Operates under the euphemism, I think they call it, of Bob Wire. I used to be under something called the POTaxpayer until I got outed on the net. People were infuriated by that. I'm not quite sure why. Because I operated to a degree of anonymity, that they only dreamed of. And so people would hurl all sorts of epithets, as they say. I love that saying, hurl epithets. They'd also curse me out. They'd also get mad. Because I just refused to say who I was. Because who I am is unimportant. It's quality of my ideas that are important. Some are good, some are probably weak. The difference being that I'm willing to subject them to public criticism. You can shred them, show me a new direction. I'll hate every moment of it, but if I'm in fact wrong, he says. Remember the Fonz couldn't say the word wrong? Couldn't say it. The Fonz evolved, obviously, over the life of that great Shakespearean enterprise, Happy Days. Early on, he was a subject to be feared. He was the ultimate of cool. And over time, until that penultimate moment when he jumped the shark, the concept in the early days of Happy Days of an episode dedicated to the Fonz behind a speedboat and a lake in a swimming suit was unthinkable. The reason why they have the term jumping the shark is because there was an episode of Happy Days where the Fonz, being dragged along by a motorboat, was skiing, water skiing, and he literally jumped the shark. And that was the beginning of the end of Happy Days as we knew it. So yeah, I'll kicking and screaming. I'll finally, I won't admit it that I was wrong. I'll just one day start saying something new. I'm just like everybody else. But I limit my comments to things that I've thought about for a great deal of time, and I limit my comments to things that I've read about in an environment like this because I try not to be wrong. I try to be right. It's a worthy goal, I think. What do you say? Area code 401-205-3738. A lot of people tuned in to listen to Ken. Sometimes our publicity machine is not quite as efficient as we like to be, so it's all the more remarkable. I think, of course, the Mr. Armstrong campaign is out there. They were very professional in reaching out to me, as I found all of the campaigns. There's a lot of dedicated people working behind the scenes, most as volunteers, to work the system, if you will. So a shout out to the Armstrong people. The Gray people have reached out to me. He will be on next Tuesday. And I look forward to that. I haven't had an opportunity to have a conversation with him. Folks tell me he's very, very bright. I look forward to that. Let's engage. Working on having Vermin on. I had the opportunity to interview Vermin in a Boston pub a few months ago. And I've spoken to him on a number of occasions in person, but never on the show. And I'm looking forward to that. Again, I refuse to denigrate any of the candidates. Someone like Vermin, whose proposition, if you will, and I love using the term proposition too, the Libertarian Party is rather different than, say, Mr. Armstrong. But I see glory in all of them. Ultimately, they're all preaching a similar message. They may have subtle differences. They may have nuances. They may have different ways to get there. But ultimately, they're preaching the message of liberty, self-ownership, body autonomy, personal direction. It's all the good, same stuff. It's all from a good place. It's all good. But ultimately, they're all speaking to liberty. And there are vast stylistic differences between a Ken Armstrong, who we just had on the show, Judge Gray, who has been on this show. He started, I think he was one of our first significant guests on the show 6 or 7 years ago. Years. John McAfee was on the show when he was running for the presidency, as was Gary Johnson. We've been blessed. Over the life of the show, we've had some wonderful people on. And frankly, in retrospect, I can't really think of an occasion where any of these folks didn't lift us up, make us better simply by listening to them, giving us a different perspective, a different level of analysis, a different worldview. Ironically, all through the same prism that brings us together, which is the libertarian movement. On a local basis, I've been blessed to have real thought leaders. I've got up there on our podcast the episode where we had Bob Healy, the Cool Moose of the Cool Moose Party, who ran as a moderate party candidate for the governorship. And on the budget of somewhere, it's the apocryphal budget is under $100. Got 22 or 23% of the vote as an independent, simply because of the power of ideas, the power of his personality, the power of his image. Sadly, he left us a few years ago, and we're poorer for it. How different would our response be to COVID? In fact, if the great Bob Healy was still with us. I think with this new format, the next anniversary of his passing, I think we need to have a wake here on the show for him. Because even after he's left us for 3-4 years now, his presence is still missed. For someone who never won a major election, who never spent any real money, who was never an avid self-promoter, that's astonishing. If you're just joining us, we are the Coalition. We are broadcasting live on the Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. We're smart like that. We're on the Facebook. We're on the YouTube. We're everywhere. Take a moment to follow us, please. Since we started doing this talk show thing, I am fortunate and blessed to say that we have increased our listenership, if you will, in the sense of likes. A few more people join us every day. And we're grateful for that, because I know it takes a couple minutes to think about it. And, which sometimes you're going to get posts or notifications. You're going to be like, You'll be in the middle of something and you'll get something blasting across your screen. But we thank you for that, because, well, that's what powers us. There are nights like tonight where we got off to a great start. We had a great hour and a half of programming. We go into this mode and it's really just me. It's me and some listeners. Want to talk about the ACLU? Let's do it. We are open lines, open for business. Anyway, Bob Wire, I wish you were out there. I wish you'd have called in tonight. I'd love to engage. I just get exhausted by long, drawn-out, typed arguments. Nuances are missed. tone of voices don't reflect the conversation. Ugh. By the way, if you have a business anywhere, really, that's been impacted by COVID and you'd like to talk about it, call us. We'll arrange for a time to have you come on the air. If you're so fortunate that you found a mechanism to stay in business in some shape or form so that you can get some type of cash flow going, some type of stream of business, let us know that so we can publicize that and share that anywhere. Folks who haven't owned a business, you've missed out on one of the great challenges in life. Regardless of how big your business was, where it stands now, there's a certain thrill that comes forward on a transactional basis. And unless you've owned a business, I don't know if you can follow this precisely, but the act of someone coming in and purchasing something from you, particularly in a moment like this, where that is a challenge to do, folks have to find you and work out a way to get to you. It's ennobling, it's thrilling. A couple of folks lately in the last week or so have sent us some donations. And again, how generous of them at a time like this when everyone's personal finances. And that's why we're not beating the drum for it. We are sponsor supported. We are donor supported. It's tough to sell commercials in a moment like this where folks are looking just to keep the business going. There's not a lot of disposable income for that, which is tough because ultimately it's how you publicize yourself, which is, I'm smart like this, is going to dictate whether or not you have success in bringing people in. But commercial advertising is the juice, if you will, that brings in new, fresh business. It's such a crowded marketplace. Such a crowded marketplace. That's difficult for folks really to come on, to find you. So take a moment and call in if you've got a reaction to any one of the issues. (401-205-3738). Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio and the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course, coalitionradio.us. Join us for a few minutes if you can. We see we've got some people who just signed on. That's the eerie part of this, by the way. You can see people come and go. Sometimes you can see who they are. Sometimes you don't. Radio, of course, I often relate to stories where I was on the radio on a holiday night, late at night, and literally Literally. You might go 20 minutes, a half hour. This is on a radio station. Sizable one at that. Maybe it was me. Maybe I should take the hint, right? But you didn't have a guest on. It was a weekend night. It was a holiday weekend night. And you hoped someone would call in just to break it up. You know, you tend to vamp, tend to reach out to people. Every now and then we'll lose the signal for just a handful of moments. The web is facing challenges unlike any others. By the way, if you're signing on and you see online the screen, see the phone number, 401-205-3738. Weigh in on any of the issues of the day. What type of job do you think Gina's doing? I'm not a fan. I've never been a fan. We have this vast state bureaucracy. And yet ultimately, nothing happens. We've got entire communities who are outside of transportation, unable to get tested. They're economically challenged to begin with. They're marginalized communities. Healthcare is a real day-to-day issue with them. The government has effectively confounded any attempts in Rhode Island to build these urgent care centers that are so popular everywhere else. We've created a situation where we rely on government. And government, quite frankly, is failing us. As always, they're intent on regulating what we will do, what we're allowed to do, and yet at the same time, they get to operate in a vast, unregulated environment. There's no accountability, is there? Government's seen fit to that. Ironically, I get the need for social distancing. I am taking the approach that this is a legitimate medical nightmare that is organic in nature. I know that some may disagree with me, and feel free to disagree with me, and feel free to give us a call to disagree about it. I get that. I personally have chosen to take it very, very seriously, which is why I'm so insulted by the fact that despite this vast bureaucracy, we had a health department honcho, a guy named Dr. Fine, by all accounts a fine individual, bad pun, who used to have what I called pandemic envy. He was ready to go to any conference. He was ready to fly anywhere, talk anywhere, go to these meetings, have these drills over in the airport tarmac where the people paint themselves up with blood and we pretend a plane has crashed. All that went on. And here we are. Months into it. Understand that for folks not from the area, Rhode Island was one of the first states to have an outbreak. We had an unfortunate event where a local private school had taken a class abroad to Italy, ironically in one of the early hot zones on the planet for this, and brought a whole bunch of corona back with them. Souvenirs. Fortunately, my understanding is no one passed from that. There were a few folks from that trip who were very ill. And we are blessed that they are still with us and managed to survive. And we were one of the first states to really restrict a lot of movement. But unfortunately, it's denigrated into this mass of moving targets. One day we're up, one next day we're down. One day we got the models, the next day the model. We have really no certainty whatsoever, despite the fact that we're a few months into that. And that's frustrating to Americans. We're used to quick resolutions. We're used to television, where the world is saved from a nuclear apocalypse because of some spy who got a bomb or something, and in the space of an hour-and-a-half movie, he finds it, he gets it, we get him, and it's dropped harmlessly into the middle of the ocean. That's how usually those nuclear bomb movies end. Batman or Superman may have taken it with them, but, we got resolution. So maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe I'm looking for resolution where, quite frankly, this time our luck has run out a little bit. There has been no quick resolution. But my frustration really lies in the inability of government, who is taking control of the situation, taking it away from private enterprise, taking it away from private companies. And you can argue that, but what you can't argue is that they behave poorly without it. Changing targets, changing numbers. What really constitutes a death from COVID? Every life is sacred, so we, of course, want to celebrate those who have left us. But in the midst of a public health emergency, it's understandable to want to know what and why they were taken from us. And we're not sure. We're still not sure. We have been unable to deploy at any real level testing programs. And as part of the pathology of this illness, it is clear to us now that people living in close proximity with health problems are unfairly targeted by this. And despite that knowledge early on, and that knowledge through simple logic, we as a government have failed to bring testing early on into those organizations, into those neighborhoods and communities that are clear will suffer the most, and also be unintentionally responsible for spreading it the most. And what have we done to work that? It's stunning. And then, of course, there's the preparation leading up to this. As a government, the policy of the American federal government has been, intentionally or unintentionally, to work to prevent free market solutions that would at least somewhat mitigate and somewhat minimize the impact of this. The government's certainly not responsible for creating this. I don't follow those conspiracy theories. I don't believe it's an exercise of 5G or flat Earth. I don't anybody, but I will never know truly, unless the world knows, whether or not this was the result of some governmental lab somewhere that intentionally or unintentionally unleashed this upon an unwitting populace. I won't know that. What I do know is, and we call them three horsemen of the apocalypse here, is that government intervention in certain markets prevented the organic growth of free market enterprises that would have been in place and empowered by their own mission, by their own risk capital, by their own sweat equity, organizations that would have been there to help at least mitigate, minimize this situation we find ourselves in. 401-205-3738. You disagree with me, whether even on the minor issue, or you disagree with me wildly, feel free to call. We treat here everyone with respect. You get an opportunity to make your point. We don't live by the tyranny of the dump button here. We don't need to have one. Can't afford one. If anyone wants to sponsor a dump button, we certainly don't have a mute. I can't put you on mute, then talk over you. That happened to me today on radio. You get put on mute, and the host gets to take whatever shots they want on you, and then they dump you. And you're only allowed to call once, so you don't get a chance to really engage in a back and forth. That doesn't happen here. Why? Because I'm in charge. And I hate that. We're looking to turn on calls so that folks can ask questions of elected officials, or just wanted to resolve a couple hiccups on that, so we'll have that soon. We want people to able to call people to come on the show. One of the things I loathe about talk radio is that there are certain outlets, and I guess fundamentally I get why, but who refuse, absolutely refuse, patently refuse. They also will not allow certain guests to have to take questions. And to that I say balderdash. Now, I understand that they're news programs, but I also understand that these senators and congressmen and self-appointed poobahs also don't want to have to answer questions. And the entire time Jack Reed has been the United States Senator for the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, I am not aware, could be, prove me if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, of a single circumstance where Jack Reed has had the temerity, the nerve, the balls, to sit on a talk radio station and take calls from his constituents. Now, the adult in me would like to turn to Jack Reed. What are you, a fraidy cat? But clearly, the senator likes to operate in an environment of control. He wants to control the narrative, control the message, control the issues, control the conversation. It's all about control. Just in the same way that our governor will not hold a press conference and allow free questioning from the crowd. If you're a host of a talk show, or if you're a writer or a reporter, you get to write your questions down and they decide if they're going to answer them. Balderdash. That's weak. If you don't have the courage of your own convictions to engage in a back and forth with your constituents, you are weak. You are weak and pathetic. Listen, I'll debate anyone, anytime, anywhere on any issue that I advocate for. Because I don't advocate for them unless I've given them a great deal of thought. One would hope our poobahs, our elected officials, our solons, the coat hangers, and all amongst them would take the issues with the same degree of seriousness. One would hope. I don't know, because I've never heard them actually had to freeform. I've never heard them actually have to engage in any real debate. I just haven't. Mary just typed in, I applaud you. Keep up your good work. Thank you very much. It's very kind. Really, it is. Late at night, I'm out here kind of alone, preaching. And I know we've got some listeners now, so I thank you for that. If you have a moment and you're listening to us on the Facebook, please take a moment to like us, just so we can stay in touch. We don't have the big advertising budget here. You could tell by our studio furniture. We like to keep a minimalist environment here at the studios of the Coalition. Yeah, minimalist. That's the word. Yeah, that's the ticket. So, got a couple other people joining us. So by the way, just a quick note on that. When we opened this up, took us a while to find a little bit of space. Here we are in the bunker in an undisclosed location, sharing space with Spiro Agnew and Dick Cheney. We were blessed to find this place. We were blessed to find a good landlord. I'm not going to tell you where it is because I don't want anybody else taking space here. But, we were very fortunate. It took a while. A lot of the mill space that had been open for so many years in Providence has recently been redeveloped as expensive lofts, well beyond the budget of a listener finance, sponsor financed operation like this. So we had to come to a decision quickly. Do we focus on, as our original thought was, on sort of a minimalistic studio set, so we could have people in like we had in the past when we were at Go Local or at WPRO? Or do we worry about the remotes? Let's get the remotes squared away. Well, fortunately, just by sheer dumb luck, we just figured let's focus on the remotes. Everything else will fall into place eventually. Well, that's how we're programming tonight, with a spirit and an energy that is unfettered. I love doing this. I love talking to you. My job is to figure out a way for you to talk back, which we hope you'll do at area code 401-205-3738. We had a great turnout tonight for candidate Armstrong, Ken Armstrong. He's running for the president of the United States on the Libertarian ticket. For folks who might not be Libertarian or listening right now, we have kind of a different approach from the duopoly. We have primaries and we have conventions where we elect delegates. But here's what's fascinating. They're non-binding. It's in our bylaws. You can bind yourself to a candidate, but no one will challenge your right to make a last-minute change, a last-minute decision. That's entirely up to you. Our president and our vice president are voted for separately. So whereas this week we had the announcement of a ticket with someone named Jim Gray. He is a judge of long repute, served in California at the circuit court level, is my understanding. A real hardened activist, someone who very successfully has communicated the message, enhanced by, of course, by his reputation as a barrister, and enhanced by his reputation on as a judge. Successfully advocated for the legalization of drugs. Now, when I say successfully, I mean he made clear, cogent points. He articulated a real message to people that they've embraced when they've had the opportunity to meet him. Challenge, of course, is getting him out to more people. He'll be joining us tomorrow night. He's running for the presidency. Now, he is in a ticket with a gentleman by the name of Larry Sharp, who ran a real hard grassroots campaign to become the governor of New York. And traveled hard to do so. New York's a vast state. Folks tend to think of downstate New York, Manhattan. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. They tend to think of that as the confines of New York. Far but. In fact, getting into Manhattan and covering Manhattan's the easy part. It's upstate New York. In some parts rural, in some parts industrial, in some parts post-industrial. Some parts very wealthy, some parts challenged. So they've chosen to run as a ticket, but quite frankly, there is a scenario where one could get nominated and the other one isn't. A unique difference. According to our bylaws nationally, and this is a challenge for us now, we must have our convention in person. Our bylaws are specific to that point. It is an enumerated responsibility. So our candidates have to do it the old-fashioned way. They have to earn it, literally up until the last minute. There's no coronation. Even Gary Johnson, who in 2012 changed the face of the libertarian movement, when he ran in 2016 was no guarantee. A couple guys named Austin and Darrell ran some pretty effective campaigns against them. So there was real drama at our convention in 2016. 2018, and again, we hold our conventions every 2 years, was really focused on the national chairmanship, which is elected. By the way, our board is elected. There are no superdelegates. It is grassroots as it gets. So, folks, if you're not libertarian, follow along with us. If not, nothing for the sheer drama of it all. But also, we have some of the most interesting candidates going. We're in conversation with the Vermin Supreme campaign as we speak to figure out a day next week when Vermin Supreme can come on. If you don't know who Vermin Supreme is, Google it. Prepare to be amazed, astonished, and even occasionally appalled. But I've had the opportunity to meet him personally now and have extended conversations with him. He's very sincere. He's been at this for years, looking for fundamental change in the American political system. He embraces liberty. He's gone through his own evolution as a candidate, as an activist. Anyone who says there's a straight line from between point A to point B to point C in the life of a grassroots activist has never walked in those person's footsteps. Because it is not a straight line. It is not a linear progression. It is, as they say in the movies, a journey of self-examination. And it is quite the journey. 20 years ago, I was a neocon. After 9/11, I was one of those guys, let's turn the Middle East into glass and blah, 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 blah. All I was missing was the Chrysler pickup truck, or I should say the Dodge pickup truck, with the American flag out the back. That's all I was missing. I'd had friends die on 9/11. I'd had a company that I'd worked for, a significant part of my life, nearly cease to exist. Over 300 people from the Marsh & McLennan companies passed on 9/11, died. I will use the word pass sometimes when regarding individuals and their families and the ordinary passage of life. When they were the subject of a brutal atrocity, I will use the word murdered, died. I believe it's an obscenity to sugarcoat their deaths. How many years later? Have they forgotten, if you will? And we've got a caller. Let's talk to someone from the 524 caller exchange. Hi, if you can hear me, welcome to the coalition. My name is Pat. Your name and what town are you calling from?
Hey, what's going on? It's William in Newport. How you doing, Pat?
Hey, buddy. Thanks for calling in tonight. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. There are a lot of different pathways when it comes to any kind of alternative political thought. Alternative as in anything outside of the two-party system, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that journey, I think that's, when it comes to dialogue, and I heard the other night you had said talk radio is America's town hall. You're completely right. And what's fascinating right now, and I'm really wondering if in the crisis, we're sort of seeing, I don't know, what you're doing and other people are doing right now, taking advantage of the time that people have, the attention that they have to a storyline, much like 9/11, but in a different way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see where other people's political evolution takes them after this, their activist evolution. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw significant shifts, maybe not General Assembly members saying, all right, I'm going to become a Republican tomorrow, but people, moving away from party, more towards common sense. I mean, we've seen the breakdown top to bottom in the medical sector, and obviously plenty of people stepping up, but so many gaps. And you wonder if you'll get a movement towards common sense, and if that gives, whether it's a Libertarian Party, independent candidates, anybody else, if it finally gives, aside from what quote unquote the independent rise of Lincoln Chafee, the independent voice, an opportunity in this state, maybe nationally, but maybe in this state, to finally rise to the mainstream and not just be marginalized as some kind of wacky idea or simply an alternative to the two-party system. So I'll hang up and listen to your thoughts, but keep doing this. I'm enjoying it.
Well, no, and thank you, but let's elaborate on that a little bit. What factors do you think, and because that's a great point, and I hadn't considered that. What factors in this emergency, because there are so many. I mean, my God, everything from the medical system to the, our dependence. One of the things that I find frustrating is that the government, in a sense, took control of all these various aspects of our lives intentionally. They took on the responsibility. What was the analogy during the last election? We were handed them the keys to the car. And not only did they break the car, they drove it off a cliff as far as I'm concerned. So when folks say to me, and I got some grief today, I called into one of the shows on PRO, and I
heard about it.
Yeah, I genuinely love PRO. But my point was, and sometimes it's hard to get a point out there, particularly to some people. And my point was that, yes, obviously I am a free market guy. I'm one shade short of anarchist. All right, not the guys who throw seats through the windows at Starbucks. The people who believe that the natural order of life is for one to control one's life. But reflective of that, or let's minimize that, my frustration was that government took charge. They pushed individual free market, individually owned efforts out of the way. They prevented them from being involved. And what we get here in Rhode Island now, and I find so upsetting, at first, let's go along, we got a crisis here, and I'm just going to take at face value the fact that we have a severe medical crisis. So we elected these people. We need to root for these people. That was my genuine thought. We need to give these people the oxygen necessary to do the right thing. A month plus into this, what we've got is a daily parade before the media, some who are objecting, some who are asleep, who have to write down their questions, hope they get asked, not be able to exchange in a back and forth, from a governor, that all she's missing is a flannel shirt, a la the governor during the great the great snowstorm of 78, the great blizzard of 78, and who repeats a baseline of statistics to us, reminds us in a schoolmarmish tone of voice that we need to social distance, or is she's going to take our new bicycle away from us. I'm beyond that too. That's just cosmetic, and I don't want to get obsessed with that. And I told myself that early on. But when it comes to accomplishments, I'm not interested, William, in people who have a crisis thrown upon them. After a few days, I want to know what they've accomplished. It's not what they're trying to do that matters. It's what they've accomplished. And so far, the principal issue right now is testing, upon which we base all of our decisions. And because the government has kept the dreaded private market out of testing, and they've taken responsibility for it both at the federal and the state level, and have performed so dreadfully, I do not believe on a public level, and they do owe us an explanation, and I want you to respond to this, I don't believe we're any further along than we were 4 or 5 weeks ago. And that's real tragedy. But what do you think?
Well, I think there might be a few areas where we are. One is you've got maybe a little bit more understanding of just how, long-term, quote unquote, this is on a scientific level and how detail-oriented it has to be. Whereas maybe, and that may not be of something you can specifically credit the Rhode Island project for, but it might have the PR campaign at some level might be introducing to the public the idea, all right, from a medical scientific perspective, this might be a long haul. Now people are choosing to respond to that in a couple of different ways. Some people are flat out rebelling. Some people are literally all on board. With the notion, all right, if we got to buckle up for 18 months, then that's it. I'll do it. No questions asked. But at least I think maybe the conversation has gotten more, if there's any benefit to the PR parade that you described there. Now, as far as behind the scenes, impossible to really tell how much information they have, I guess, at this point, what they know. But have we gotten any closer to having this thing where, quote unquote, we're back to normal? I think you're right there. No, we're not any closer. There have not been the significant accomplishments that you'd like to see or that we need, frankly. And you don't know if they're going to happen anytime soon. As far as really targeting communities and sectors that are most prone to and experiencing the most outbreaks of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest missing piece right now is we're not hearing, okay, we've identified why and specifically where we need to target to justify the closure of parks in a particular area. For example, South Providence, Roger Williams Park, guarded by police. No one's allowed to walk around. Blackstone Boulevard, today, plenty of people walking around, no police presence. So
right.
They know that there's something going on, I think, on a neighborhood-specific level here. And maybe they've learned that, and it's behind the scenes. But until they put that forth to the public, there won't be significant, widespread understanding of what's happening by people and what really they need to do to protect themselves, which may not, not driving over the border to Connecticut may have nothing to do with protecting yourself at this point. And I think that's the conversion that we really need to see soon.
No, I agree completely. I mean, I personally, I don't even want to think about the fact that if we still have National Guardsmen at the border. There was an independent effort that did a video of folks running the border, if you will, and the day or so after it was announced, and they were pulled over after they ran they drove by it. Great guys, though. Yeah. Their point, the video was very effective. A very polite state policeman asked them what they were doing. Those folks said they were under no responsibility to identify themselves. The police officer agreed, and they drove off. Now, the fact that those National Guardsmen were there, I'm not suggesting that police engaged in this activity, but wouldn't those National Guardsmen been better served in terms of using their time? And it costs us money. This isn't a volunteer effort. And God bless them, by the way. I'm not accusing them of trying to profit from this or get rich, but there's an expense there from the community. Wouldn't they efforts have been better served taking some troop deployment carriers, fixing them up so that they were highly sanitary, and picking up folks from disadvantaged communities who couldn't quite figure out how to get to Lincoln because the Riptor brings and I'm going to be blunt here, the Riptor brings lots of nice, wealthy white people to Twin River. It doesn't really service the hood very well. And I know that from personal experience. How do you know that from personal experience, Pat? You're a middle-aged white guy who lives in the burbs. Well, you know what? I'll throw this out there, and I've mentioned it once or twice publicly. For 2+ years, while both my daughters were in college, I worked 3 jobs. One of them, I drove Lyft in this city. I did over 3,000 Lyft rides, William. 3,000. A significant part of them took place in Providence. A significant part of them took place on the West End and the South End, for whom Lyft and Uber represents the only way that they can get back and forth to work. Now, think of that for a moment. We've got folks who are hardworking. I mean, I'm talking about CNAs. CNAs are one of the duct tapes that hold together our system. These people do all the real hard, gruesome work on a day-to-day basis, whether it be in senior facilities or in hospitals. These folks are spending the equivalent of 2 hours or so of their labor every day simply to get back and forth to work, because despite the fact that we spend $1 bazillion, that's a real number, by the way, $1 bazillion on mass transportation, there is no effective mass transportation that mirrors the schedules of folks who work either at home or private health care. Huh?
That's a real specific point, as well with the CNAs and probably where, when we think about where we're going to go and what a truly unhampered or untampered with, I suppose free market would look like, a just one, I think, just the either looking at it from a compensation standpoint or just broadly from an infrastructure standpoint. How do you justify someone making $10, $10.50 an hour right now on the front lines of this, this operation, and then look back on their experience throughout their life, essentially, for the most part, and sit back and just say, okay, well, let's move on with things exactly the way they are. So those are the real specific questions that need, in my opinion, I guess, being less vague. Yeah, identifying where the problem areas are, why they're the way they are, and what we're going to do to adjust going forward. And that's going to be a variety of things. It's going to be a public component, a private, individual people's moral compass, whatever it may be. It's got to be a collection of ideas. And I think it could start now in this crisis if the governor is willing to, and she runs the risk of, getting into trouble by seeming like it's a political stunt at some level. But if she's able to roll out things that we can beta test here, whether it be the National Guard delivering groceries, whatever it is, and then flip it into actual practice in the future, I think that's what we want to see. I think that's what a lot of us are looking for. The solutions, frankly.
Well, exactly. So why not have, instead of standing up there with your phalanx of flax, say that 3 times fast, your highly compensated flax, and simply have an honest conversation with the citizens at one of these hackoramas, all right? Get up in front and say, okay, folks, let's have an honest conversation. We have a challenge here. You don't even have to use the P word, the problem word. You can say, if you want to be really honest, we have a problem here. We've got a vast group of people that need to be tested who are in the city, because that's quite frankly where a lot of the hotspots are right now. COVID isn't running rampant in the hills of North Cumberland. COVID is running rampant in cities across the nation where people are living in close proximity who already suffer from a number of pre-existing conditions, which, of course, subject them to a higher level of rampage from this disease. They're using mass transportation to get to and from to work, because without work, they will simply cease to survive. They are having to do all sorts of extra legal practices just to survive. As I say often on this show, it's awfully expensive to be poor these days. So with all of that going on, the governor says, you know what? We have to find, as a Rhode Island family, We've got to find a way to address these hotspots, and this is what we're going to do. And it doesn't involve the police creating a police environment. It doesn't involve shame. It doesn't involve pedantic patronizing. You like that? Pedantic patronizing. It doesn't involve any of that nonsense. It involves a conversation amongst adults about what we need to do. This is what I think we do. This, and this. It might not all be successful. And we may have to find different alternatives on how to deliver it. But you know what? This is what we're going to do. This is where we're really at. And you know what? That might scare the hell out of some people. But it will also achieve buy-in to a lot of folks who simply, at this point, 5 or 6 into the weeks, as many of them watch their future employment, their careers, their businesses get destroyed, literally destroyed, it will give them some comfort that, in fact, we're moving forward. Maybe give them that boost to fight a little harder to hang on to their businesses, to make that extra phone call, to reach out to people. I don't know. I don't have any answers, William. I just don't. But I know what we're doing right now is not working at any level.
Yeah, I think that's the key is, and hey, look, they might roll it out. They might roll it out, and I guess I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that at some point we're going to be blown away by that conversation that you're describing there. But I think the bottom line is there's a lot of people statewide that are feeling, you know what, life isn't really all that different. I don't know anybody who's sick. All I know is my business or my job is going away, and this is complete nonsense. While at the same time, if you go to other populations in the state, it's a complete opposite experience.
Right.
And we've got to find a way to marry those two worlds. And I guess that's where my rant will end, because everything, that's really where the logical conclusion is, how can we marry those worlds finally and get people under, because it didn't work with the Providence schools. It didn't work with Central Falls. It doesn't work with a Wyatt. It doesn't work. Somehow, some way, we've got to find a way to connect the dots. This might be it. So,
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for calling, and please don't be a stranger. We're going to try to stay on the line every night late, as long as we can, as long as we can stay awake, and as long as the calls keep coming in. So I thank you very much for the time, for taking the call. Very thoughtful.
Hey, appreciate it, man. It's great to have this option. This particularly at this hour. It's great. Live local talk. Keep it going.
Well, I thank you, and I'll leave you this thought. The hope is that as much as I like to rant, and sometimes, boy, can I rant, but the hope is that when folks call in, they feel they will have been treated professionally, with dignity, that they'll have more than enough opportunity to evoke their viewpoint, more than enough opportunity to follow up, not just be, I call it the tyranny of the mute button, not just make a point and then spoken over and then the phone goes dead and you have, that's it. And then someone belittles you, God forbid, or something like that. That's not going to happen here, because I'm a talk radio junkie myself. You can, I call talk radio a lot. I don't know how much longer that'll last if they find out I'm doing this, but I call talk radio a lot. And, I have found it to be, I call it America's Town Hall. I found that to be an ennobling experience, because you get to, if you're a regular ham and egger like me, you get to address sometimes the high and mighty and the grand poobahs, if you will, our Solons, our wise men, and you get to take them on head on and bring up all the nasty subjects. But at the same time, too, there are times when you feel like if you don't fit the narrative, if you want to argue a point politely, professionally, articulately, without ad hominem attacks or the use of obscenities, that simply isn't part of the program that day. Fit in or, be good or be gone. And I hope the folks who listen to this understand I'm not interested in that kind of conversation. I've never been that guy at a party who can talk about the weather. I'm the guy that people make eye contact with and they're like, ruh-roh. Oh, man. I'm the guy who you're having a conversation with while you're desperately trying, your friends hoping you come in and ask you about the Red Sox. So that's the plan here. That's the program. So please spread the word and understand that it's 401-205-3738, and we're coalitionradionetwork.com. They can click on and make a phone call and have a few laughs, and we can engage in mutual commiseration, I guess. I don't know. But you have a good night, all right, buddy?
Keep it up.
All right, man.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, I hope so. Again, that's the central premise here, that folks can establish community through conversation. Whew, what a concept, particularly in the days of social media. In the days of social media, we're supposed to scream at each other to our increasingly smaller bubbles and rant about people who are not like us, who disagree with us. And we apply to them all sorts of labels, and we send them emojis and thumbs down, and we rant against them. And the circle gets a little smaller. And the ideas become more sparse. We all agree with each other. And it feels so good. I'm disappointed. There's this internet presence. I don't think it's his real name, and listen, far be it from me to complain about that. I operated under the term POTaxpayer for a good 4 years, as we say in the Blackstone Valley, until somebody dropped a dime to Facebook. It used to infuriate people that I would do that. Infuriate them. There is the husband of a sitting Providence City Council person. I'll just leave it at that. Doesn't matter what their name is. Who would rant at me until finally one night we were in an open chat, and I just was dropping some anti-government bombs. And he just started ranting, and I said, "Does it really upset you that much?" Because he asked me, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "I'm no one. I'm every man. I really am no one. I'm just a regular guy with a microphone. An incredible ability to talk ceaselessly. Ceaselessly." So I says to him, "Does it really bother you personally that I say these things and you don't know who I am?" There's this silence. And he types the immortal word, "Yes." And then there's this silence. And I respond with the word, "Cool." Because that was the point. It's unimportant who the messenger is. We elevate in this society certain politicians, certain news people, deliverers of information. We put them on this pedestal as if they somehow, particularly the ones who are the news readers, but in general, that they are somehow above the fray. They are not like us. They are better. We must listen to them because they have access to a microphone. I am living proof that anybody can get access to a microphone. Literally. I mean, the embodiment of the ham and egger who all of a sudden woke up one morning and there was a microphone in front of him and started talking. Somewhere around 2012 or so, I got to find the recording. It's out there. Some guy named Tony Jones had seen me online ranting about something and said, "Come on to their show." I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." And as I mentioned the other night, he asked me a question, what bothers you or what enrages you about politics today? And something like 27 minutes later, I came up for air, and they were kind of just staring at me, not quite sure what to make of it. Tony Jones, of course, if you haven't met him, if you haven't chatted with him, you should. He's one of the godfathers of indie media here in Rhode Island. He was one of the founders of the coalition, one of the early folks on WBOB. He's actually on the radio now. I will actually find out. I got to get the call letters and the link to his morning show. Does a lot of indie rock, a lot of rockabilly, and he's a real rock and roll guy. Do a search on the Tony Jones Show on the Facebook or anywhere on social media. He'll come up. Really, I call him the Pompidous of Love after a certain Steve Miller song, but he is one of the godfathers of indie media in the state. Kind of indie media 2.0. And there are legions of people around this who are in or have tried indie media because of Tony Jones. And we need more indie media. The more, the better. I recently saw I don't know if they had put the article or somebody had put out the plea to support local newspapers. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Thinking of the Breeze or, any one of a handful of folks who are still doing the printed word thing. And it was the Providence Journal. I'm like, oh, man. This is hard. How can I not be sarcastic about this? Because on one hand, there's some good people who work for the Providence Journal. There's a lot of good people who used to work for the Providence Journal, and that's the problem. The Providence Journal, describing themselves as local media, is laughable. And I say that carefully because there are Kathy Gregg comes to mind automatically. Some great talent still left at that newspaper. But when you look at the talent that's left and their refusal to embrace local issues, in that exists the ultimate cautionary tale. Because when you lose root and track of what's important, you suffer for it. And it is now conventional wisdom that the Journal abandoning its local bureaus all those years ago was the beginning of an inexorable slide to irrelevance. Some would say they're there. I don't want to insult the talent that still exists despite the best efforts of the management of the Providence Journal. When I mean the management, I'm talking about the wise men who, many area codes away, many states away, actually physically owns the Journal. I can't consider them local. Listen, when the Boston Globe provides more reporting on local issues through the services of Mr. Fitzpatrick and et al., Mr. McGowan, forgive me at this moment, the name of the other reporter escapes me. It's late at night. I've been doing this for a while. But 3 very talented writers. And what do I mean by writers? Not just people who can report, can list a set of facts. The skill of writing is lost upon us these days. They are Ed Fitzpatrick is a very good writer. And so much of the previous Providence Journal talent was comprised of folks who are very good writers. And by writers, I mean people that can put pen to paper, or in this case, fingers to keyboard, and tell a tale. And do it in such a way, there's structure, beginning, end, drama, surprise endings sometimes, or not so surprise endings other times. But people who can communicate through the written word. That's a dying breed. So when you take 3 of the most talented reporters in the area and you move them up to Boston and you create a separate section for them, holy schmolies. Very few people, actually really no one does Providence like Dan McGowan. Kate Nagel does a great job in Providence, but Dan is in a class, a unique class. Lives and breathes it. You can tell. And he does it from Boston. Now, right now, I would imagine he's doing it from that extra bedroom in his house or maybe his kitchen table, but the notion that that type of communication, that attention to detail, that level of analysis, that inclusion in the community has to take place from 60 miles north in a state and a community as tribal as Rhode Island? That's appalling. So no, I cannot support the Providence Journal because it's the hometown paper. It is not the hometown paper. It is a vestige of the hometown paper for which some very talented people work for who I wish no harm upon. But we know how this movie ends. I can't imagine after this, given the challenges that advertising-based media has, that they can in fact continue to exist in a printed format, which means they will go to all digital. No crime in that, but ultimately, my bet is that in 5 years, the Providence Journal becomes the Providence, Rhode Island section of an online newspaper that's part of a national organization. And it will slowly fade to black. And then one day people will talk about, wow, there's this great newspaper. And it was a truly great newspaper. Understand that the Providence Journal for many years served as sort of the AAA affiliate for the truly national newspapers. The current publisher, the New York Times, I believe, is an alumnus of said Providence Journal. Holy cow. How can that be? Well, you know, it's only telling that people are willing to spend money to subscribe to the Boston Journal in order to get the talents of those 3 columnists, yet subscription rates continue to fall at said Providence Journal. They're just out of touch. They've lost a connection to the community which they purport to serve. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm a wannabe who plays it on the radio. So, not sure what to tell you. Not sure what to tell you. The future does not bode well. Another area publication, the Valley Breeze, in its printed edition, has asked for support. For years, they were a free newspaper that was supported largely by a pretty good swath of area business people. I mean, their pages were packed with local ads. And God bless them for it. Editorially, I don't always, I rarely agree with them, but you know what? They were running a viable business that employed local people and reported news. That's an accomplishment these days. And yet, deep down, their business model is crumbling. Anything that draws on advertising support is in difficult times right now, because many of these advertisers have had to draw back. We've had our sponsors have had to draw back in part because realities. I mean, they're looking about keeping their doors open. That's their first responsibility. So it's really it's going to be fascinating in the worst way to see who outlives COVID. Because unfortunately, it's all going to be all about low overhead, being able to draw listener support. This business is going to have to be worked harder than ever. And on top of that, you've got this explosion. I mean, we've been doing this for 6-7 years. I'd like to think we're not a flash in the pan. We've been doing the interview part. This talk radio thing we've been doing for about 2-3 weeks. And we're slowly starting to attract people who are dialing in, who are calling in. I see the ebb and flow. But it's a challenge. We're also late at night. So we're hoping that we can generate our own channel, if you will, put our own signal, put our own stamp on our own signal, our own presence here in the state of Rhode Island. And we're going to work damn hard at it. Yesterday, and we'll have them out for general appeal, but you can go to our Facebook page and still find it. Melissa Jenkins of the Collective Action Network, formerly the Cranston Action Network, spent an hour or so with us. Whole lot of people, they're still watching that. We had Hannah from the American Civil Liberties Union talking about privacy. That's the kind of conversations I think are important. Now, the problem is, of course, is proof of concept. Very often, because the owner of a business or the host or the person providing the significant push behind something delivers what they think works for people. They might be dead wrong. I could be dead wrong. People complain all the time about talk radio beating up on them. How talk radio used to be a presence at night. People say what they want, but does that mean what they're going to do? The challenge for me is not to be a bookstore. Everyone loves bookstores. Everyone loves bookstores. Who doesn't love hanging out in a bookstore? Now, I really love hanging out in a bookstore, but most people will hang out in a bookstore. The difference is, will they buy any books? Or do they just like to be seen or absorb the aura, if you will, of being in a bookstore? That, of course, is an excellent challenge for anyone who happens to own a bookstore, as is staying afloat. Bookstores were almost eliminated from the face of the earth in the rise of Amazon. Interestingly enough, bookstores that are independent are experiencing a significant comeback. Many of them occupy very exclusive niches: travel, children's books, political. There's a couple anarchist bookstores out there. Yikes. The common denominator amongst all of this is whether you're a newspaper, you're a bookstore, whether you're anything, you'd better be really, really good or find out what you need to do to be really, really good at what you do. Because you're in competition with so much noise, so many other folks who are working it hard. Podcasts, blogs, video blogs, interview shows, panel shows, all of that. There is considerable competition out there for the eyes and ears of the listening and viewing public. Even more so now that people have dead time. There's a lot of people out there starting, I've always wanted to do a blog. This is a great time to do it. And you know what? They're right. And from some of them will evolve greatness. Others will understand the level of work that's involved in producing day after day after day, or at least week after week after week, written or the spoken word. And they will become exhausted by it. And they will stop doing it. They'll say, I'm going to take a little break and I'll get back to it. And inevitably they don't. It's hard. You've really got to love what you're doing. Hopefully you've enjoyed, if you listen to the show, or if you listen to it now into the near future, you've enjoyed what we're doing here. If you do, please tell a friend. Please share our post or like us or follow us. If you don't, if you send us some gentle suggestions, be kind. The host and the handful of people who work on this really put a lot into it. Some days it shows, other days maybe not. But we really, really try hard. And these days in America, isn't that all it really matters? We participate. I'll go with the participation award right now. So in fact, it's time for us to sign off. We're a little bit after midnight. Mary writes she has a blog. Mary, type it in the comments. It's nice to share if you're still listening. I encourage shameless self-promotion. I encourage promotion. If folks out there want to share what they're doing with us, no worries. The airtime right now is filled up a little bit with candidates, but, as far as actually putting it out there, put it out there. It's all good. A good friend of mine now has, and let me just get the website on this properly. Terrible, I should know this because he was pretty clear with me. I want to get straight though. It's RI Golf. If you're a golfer or you're thinking about becoming a golfer, this is good stuff. I recommend this. I'm not a golfer, and I like to read about it. Or I should say, I have tried golf. I'm terrible at it. Terrible. Just really bad. I'm the guy that you don't want to get behind. I'm the guy that once every 10 times, I have no discipline when it comes to this stuff. So I just don't practice. I don't take lessons. Every year or two, I just go out and do. And that's not a good recipe. Yeah, that's not good at all. That's not good at all. A couple things I posted today on the Facebook on my personal page. Facebook is pretty hinky these days when sharing from the Coalition Radio page. Yes, it's golfnewsri.com. Golfnewsri.com. Great stuff, new blog. I also put a piece out there from Cato. Just the other day, the president had announced that he had struck a deal with with Russia and Saudi Arabia in order to increase the price of oil. Indirectly, he didn't say that. But what he did was he talked about a negotiated settlement where a bunch of people would cut production. And I'm a pump baby. Now, I embrace new technology, and I'm impressed that in certain ways solar energy is gaining more and more steam. Yes, it's subsidized, but so is golf. You know, it's golf. Golf subsidized it a little bit. Oil is subsidized, yes, vastly. There's an entire world of specific tax laws which create special exemptions and special approaches to creating gas and oil partnerships, all sorts of things that those folks get. I point that out because people usually scream like stuck pigs about the subsidies surrounding solar energy. Not happy about that either. I would like, at this point, all of these to operate in a free market and justify themselves by their continued existence in the marketplace, not with my money or your money. Because remember, taxation is theft. But take a look at this Cato commentary. I got a lot of grief from some alleged Republican free marketeers who understood that the government needed to intervene because of, as my one Facebook friend, I got to tease him, shades of gray. It's about the jobs. Price fixing is bad at any level. And yes, businesses need to fail. And people will be hurt when businesses need to fail. But when businesses are allowed to fail naturally and without taxpayer intervention and without government intervention, other businesses prop up. My point to these folks was that one of the few, and I hate to even use, because people are dying, I won't even really use the word silver lining. One of the few upsides, how about that? We'll use the word upside instead of silver lining. One of the few upsides of this economic collapse was because the rate of oil consumption was down so drastically, which, by the way, is why you can see yourself in Los Angeles. Because oil consumption was down so drastically, the market reaction was natural. There was a glut. Prices fell. As a result, certain higher cost providers, particularly in the environment of frack gas and frack fuels, were no longer competitive. Oh well, find a way to be competitive or go out of business. That's how it works. That's just how it works. And if you can't handle that, you can't, as they say, handle the truth. So, I think what we're going to do at this point, after a wonderful evening, is to sign off for the night. We've got a couple of people on. Listen, if you're out there and you want to call in, I know what is it as the song goes for closing time? I'll spare singing to you. We hope to get some sort of licensing soon where we can start playing music. Go to YouTube and do a search on closing time. As they say, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And it's the last call for alcohol. So give us a call in the next minute or so before we start to shut down. Folks, we are, as always, the Coalition, loud and proud, outreach, born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And, of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. You've got an awful lot of ways that you could spend your time for the 500 or 600 people or so who spent even a little bit of time with us tonight. We thank you. We'll have more programming well into the weekend. And we look forward to engaging with you with politics, art, and the culture at large. Again, if you have a moment and you hear this, take a moment to like our page. Take a moment to follow us on the mighty, mighty Twitter. You can find our YouTube page. We'll get better at that. Subscribe to us. That allows us the opportunity to disseminate our message effectively to a larger audience. And that, of course, is the mother's milk of independent media. Finding a way through the noise to provide, hopefully, some value in even the most challenging times like this. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.